Close your eyes. You wake in darkness, but not silence. You hear the faint pop of embers, a soft stir of something thick, bubbling in an iron pot, the breath of a sleeping goat somewhere nearby. And in the rafters above you, smoke drifts slowly, lazily, catching the first morning light through a crack in the roof. You're not in your home. You're in a Viking longhouse. Your bed is made of rough straw and wool. You feel the chill of the stone floor through your feet as you stand. The air smells of soot, earth, dried herbs, and something cooking low and slow over fire. Barley porridge, maybe, or a stew made from yesterday's scraps. You reach for a carved wooden bowl. Your fingers brush a spoon, worn smooth by years of use, and without speaking a word, without fully waking the others, you move toward the hearth. Because today, your job is to cook, and that means your work has already begun. The fire in the center of the house never fully dies. It's your job to tend it, to keep the warmth alive, even while the warriors sleep, the children dream, and the winds howl outside. This is not a modern kitchen. There is no sink, no gas, no fridge, no tiles. Just a long, low structure of timber and turf, tools carved from bone, pots blackened by years of open flame, bundles of herbs hanging from the ceiling, smoked fish strung neatly by the back wall, a wooden barrel sealed with wax to keep the pickled onions from spoiling. You won't find a cookbook here. Everything is passed down by memory, by hands, by careful watching, what to boil, when to dry, how to stretch the last of the salt. And you must be careful, because every crumb matters. In this video, you'll slip quietly into the life of a Viking cook. You'll learn what they ate and how they made it. You'll feel the grind of barley beneath stone, the weight of an iron cauldron, the rhythm of bread baking on flat rock. You'll hear the quiet footsteps of a woman collecting seaweed for stew, or the wind that pushes a fishing boat home with nothing but salted herring and cold fingers. You'll discover the truth behind the feasting myths, that behind every feast was 100 ordinary meals, quiet meals, meals made without glory, without song, but with great care. And most of all, you'll learn what it felt like to live in that world, not as a warrior, not as a legend, but as someone who stirred the pot, carved the meat, and fed the people who built a world from fire and frost. So stay with me. Let the noise of the modern world drift away, and for just a little while, step into a forgotten kitchen, place of smoke, silence, and survival. A place where every meal was a small miracle. Welcome to Boring History for Sleep. If you're new here, we make calming, slow-paced journeys into the hidden corners of the past, stories full of quiet work, simple lives, and soft sounds, perfect for drifting off or just slowing down. So if you enjoy this kind of peaceful time travel, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. There's a warm fire ahead and a long day of cooking to begin. Let's step into the past together. The hearth at the center. The longhouse is quiet, but never still. Outside, the cold wind pushes across a frozen fjord. But here inside, at the center of everything, a small fire crackles gently. Its glow flickers across worn wooden beams. The smoke rises slowly, curling through the rafters, where it finds its own way out through the smoke hole in the roof. There, are no chimneys, no ovens, no polished stovetops. Just this, an open hearth, dug shallow into the packed earth floor. It is not fancy. It does not need to be. The hearth is not just where the cooking happens. It is the sun of this small, wooden universe. All around it, life unfolds. The elders sit closest to the fire, rubbing their hands and sharing quiet stories. The youngest children stay just far enough not to burn themselves. Chickens wander nearby. A dog naps close, turning every so often from the warmth. The fire gives light, heat, and food. But it also gives rhythm. Without it, the longhouse would fall into silence and cold. Above, the beams are stained nearly black. Years, decades of smoke have left their mark. You can trace the age of the house by the way the ceiling darkens from center to wall. Even the tools, wooden ladles, iron hooks, clay pots, carry the scent of smoke. You sit by the hearth now, watching the coals shift. A pot hangs from a chain above the flames. The broth inside simmers slowly, thick with root vegetables and salt. You don't stir it yet. Not until it tells you it's ready. There's no clock, no timer. You watch the steam. You smell the garlic and onion. You listen to the soft bubble of heat. You wait. Someone across from you gently feeds the fire, not with whole logs, but with thin, dried branches and kindling. Larger wood will come later, once the flames are strong. For now, the fire must be nursed. A child returns from outside, her arms full of kindling, wrapped in a cloth. It must stay dry. Damp wood means smoke, too much smoke, and the wrong kind of heat. She places it carefully near the fire pit, then rubs her hands together. She's learning already. Where to stand, what to watch, when to be still. On a shelf nearby, dried moss and thin pine roots are bundled tightly. These are used to catch flame quickly, especially in winter when mornings are dark. There are no matches, no lighters, just a flint stone, a bit of patience, and good memory. You lean closer to check the coals, glowing orange at the edges, still gray at the core. A few embers float upward and vanish. You shift the pot slightly to one side, where the heat is steady, but not too strong. Cooking here is not about fire. It's about learning how to dance with it. The fire crackles again. A small sound, like breaking twigs. You listen to it as you slice turnips with a dull iron knife. Your cutting board is a flat piece of oak, worn smooth with years of use. There are grooves in it, from blades long gone. Everything here has a history. Nothing is wasted. A wooden spoon rests near the hearth. Its handle is blackened at the end. Burned a little too long once, maybe, but still useful. A pair of tongs hang from the wall. They were forged by the blacksmith 2 winters ago. His mark is still there, etched at the base. You stir the pot slowly now, careful not to splash. The smell rises, rich, simple, familiar. A mix of cabbage, barley, and dried herbs. A pinch of sea salt added. Yesterday is still working its way through. There is no rush. Dinner will be ready when the fire says so. A man passes behind you, silent on fur-wrapped feet. He adjusts the animal skins hanging near the door to keep out the draft. Outside, snow is falling again. But here, at the hearth, the warmth holds steady. The dog shifts in his sleep. Someone chuckles softly nearby. A baby stirs, but doesn't cry. And still the fire burns, slow and low, the way it always has. Overhead, bundles of herbs dangle from the beams. Angelica, thyme, and wild garlic, tied in rows with wool thread. Some are for cooking, some for healing. Some, it's said, are for luck. A few smoked fish hang further down, drying slowly in the fire's gentle breath. When they are ready, they'll be rehydrated in broth or roasted with foraged leeks. A second pot is being set now, next to yours. This one is for the flatbread, ground barley mixed with water, pressed by hand, cooked on a hot stone set into the coals. There is no yeast, no butter, just flour, fire, and patience. You press one flat circle now, your hands dusted with flour. The dough is sticky. You add a little more meal. You remember the words your mother once said. You'll feel when it's right, not too wet, not too dry, like spring mud. And it does feel right. You place it carefully onto the stone. It sizzles faintly. A small puff of steam escapes the edge. In a few minutes, it will curl at the corners and darken. Someone else checks the stew, adds a handful of split peas, gives a nod. It's good. And all the while, the fire burns on. It is never just about heat. It is memory, community, ritual. The hearth is the heart of this house, and every meal begins and ends here. Every story is told in its warmth, morning porridge, and quiet tasks. The dawn creeps softly over the horizon, pale light slipping through narrow windows and cracks in the wooden walls. Outside, the earth is cold and hard from the night frost. Inside, the longhouse stirs to life, though not with noise, only with small, purposeful movements. In the kitchen corner, the hearth still glows faintly from last night's fire, but it's time to add fresh wood. The smell of smoke lingers, mixed with a faint earthiness from dried herbs hanging overhead. The air is cool, and your breath rises in gentle puffs. You find yourself beside a large wooden bowl. Inside are oats and barley, rough grains harvested from the fields nearby. They have been soaked overnight to soften. You pick up a heavy wooden spoon, worn smooth from the years of stirring, and slowly begin to mix the grains in a pot of simmering water. The porridge thickens gradually, quietly bubbling over the fire. The spoon moves steadily, back and forth, around and around. The sound is soft, almost a whisper, barely breaking the silence of the morning. There is no rush. The meal must be patient, just like the fire. Nearby, a small group of hands works in rhythm. One carries water from a nearby well, a wooden bucket swinging gently with each step on the packed earth floor. Another grinds grains between two flat stones, turning the hard kernels into coarse flour for bread later in the day. The simplicity of a Viking breakfast is clear. No silver platters or fine linens. No fragrant fruits or imported spices. Just what the land and sea provide. Prepared with quiet care. Outside, boots scrape against earth and stone. The sound echoes faintly through the stillness, a reminder that life continues beyond the walls. The longhouse holds its breath, waiting for the sun to rise fully. A bowl is placed near the fire's edge, steaming gently. It will feed the household, farmers, smiths, and traders, fuel for a long day ahead. The porridge is thick, plain, but warm, sometimes sweetened with honey or scattered with wild berries when available, but often it is eaten as is. A humble start. A child sits nearby, eyes still heavy with sleep, watching the slow stirring. Their fingers twitch, craving a taste. The older ones quietly remind them to wait. Patience is learned early here. You can almost feel the coolness of the morning air brushing against your skin beneath thick woolen clothes. The smell of damp earth drifts in through the open door. A slight breeze carries the scent of pine and salt from the distant sea. Around you, every movement is deliberate. A knife scrapes against a wooden bowl, preparing to carve chunks of smoked fish for the day. A pot is cleaned with water, drawn fresh from the well. The liquid cool and clear. The pace is steady, unhurried. There is no clatter, no shouting. The work is done with respect for the fire, the food, and the household. Every step feels weighted with history. These are the same tasks done for centuries before you. The rhythm is ancient, unchanging. A pot of water is set to boil, ready to wash the day's dishes once the meal is done. Nearby, a bundle of fresh herbs is gathered, a touch of wild thyme, a sprig of mint, to add to the cooking later. The longhouse breathes with quiet life. The hearth at the center flickers, casting shadows on the worn wooden walls. Outside, the world is waking, but here, in the Viking kitchen, the morning begins slowly. Soon, the day's work will pull everyone in many directions. Fields to tend, animals to feed, goods to trade. But this moment, the simple stirring of porridge, is a calm before the storm. The warmth from the fire seeps into your fingers. The grains shift softly under the spoon's edge. The morning light grows stronger. You take a deep breath, tasting the quiet. It is the first meal, the first ritual. This is how the Vikings began their day. The ingredients of the North. The Viking kitchen relied on what the rugged northern land could provide. There was no endless pantry, no distant markets filled with exotic spices or sugar. Instead, there was a quiet, steadfast resourcefulness, a way of making the most of what nature gave and preserving it carefully through long, dark winters. Salted fish hung from wooden racks above the hearth, their leathery skins stretched tight. Cod, herring, and salmon, caught fresh from icy waters, were cleaned and rubbed with coarse sea salt. The salt drew out moisture, preserving the fish for months, long after the rivers and seas had frozen over. The air smelled faintly of the sea, a briny, sharp scent mingling with the smoke of the fire. Every bite carried the taste of salt and wind. Nearby, smoked lamb hung low, thick strips of meat cured over slow-burning wood fires. The smoke curled around the longhouse beams, coloring the walls with a faint amber haze. This was no gourmet treat. It was survival, shaped by generations. The Vikings knew every inch of their land, and their meals reflected it. Root vegetables, turnips, carrots, parsnips were dug from the earth and stored in cool, dark pits lined with straw. These vegetables were hearty and humble, earthy flavors that would fill the belly through chilly days. Bundles of seaweed, gathered from rocky shores, dried on wooden frames, it added not only flavor, but nutrients, iron and salt. Where fresh greens were scarce, seaweed might be boiled into stews, or dried and crumbled into porridge. The kitchen tools were simple but sturdy. Wooden bowls, clay pots, knives with carved handles, and heavy stone mortars for grinding grains and herbs. There were no copper pots or iron skillets here. Just what could be fashioned from the land and crafted by hand. Food was stored with care. Drying racks held slices of meat and fish, allowing the cold air to circulate. Barrels were filled with salted goods, sealed tight with wax or pitch to keep out moisture and pests. Root vegetables rested underground in storage pits, where the earth kept them cool and safe. There was no sugar to sweeten the stews, no pepper or cinnamon to tingle the tongue. Those spices were tales from distant lands, beyond the horizon and out of reach. Instead, Vikings relied on wild herbs, thyme, juniper berries, and wild garlic, to add faint, sharp notes to their cooking. Each ingredient carried the story of the land and the sea, harsh, unyielding, but generous to those who knew how to work with it. The kitchen was a place of transformation, where simple roots and salted fish became sustenance. Meals were about making the most of what was available. There was no waste. Every scrap was used. Bones boiled for broth, skin stretched and dried for storage, ashes scattered on fields to enrich the soil. The rhythms of the seasons dictated the kitchen's stores. Summer brought fresh fish, wild berries, and fresh greens. Autumn was the time to harvest root vegetables and preserve meat for winter. When the snow fell thick, the kitchen was stocked with dried, salted, and smoked foods. Vikings were masters of preservation. Salt was treasured not just for flavor, but as a key to survival. It was traded carefully, measured out to ensure enough for the lean months. In this kitchen, the harsh northern climate shaped every decision. There was a deep understanding that nature gave only so much, and what was not preserved was lost. The Viking kitchen was less about abundance and more about balance between the gift of the land and the need to endure. The smell of drying fish mingled with earth and smoke. Barrels sealed with wax waited patiently in dark corners. Wooden beams overhead carried the weight of years of food preparation. Every ingredient had a purpose, every method a history. This was not just cooking. It was living with the land's rhythms, adapting and enduring. Tools of bone and iron. The Viking kitchen was a place shaped not only by the food, but by the tools, humble and sturdy, worn smooth by years of use. These tools were crafted from what the land and sea provided: wood, bone, iron, and each one carried the weight of tradition, passed down carefully from one hand to the next. Wooden ladles curved gracefully from branches, carved and hollowed with rough knives. Their surfaces were worn smooth by decades of stirring thick stews and scooping hot broth. The handles fit comfortably in a hand that had learned by touch alone. No need for instructions or words. The ladle was an extension of the cook's arm, moving rhythmically over open flames, dipping and pouring, coaxing meals from simmering pots. Knives were the most vital tools. Many had handles made from bone, perhaps a deer's antler or a whale's rib, shaped carefully to fit fingers roughened by work. These knives were sharp, honed over and over, their iron blades gleaming faintly. Despite years of smoke and soot, the metal was precious, forged by skilled blacksmiths in village forges, then passed down through families, each scratch and nick telling a story. Pots were simple, heavy clay vessels blackened from decades of use, the soot darkening their rounded bodies. They rested near the hearth or hung over the fire on the sturdy iron hooks. These pots had seen countless meals, porridge thickening, meat boiling, broths simmering long into cold evenings. There were no gleaming utensils or polished tools. Here, instead, the kitchen was filled with things shaped by hand and need, spoons carved from bone or wood, chopping blocks made from rough timber, stone mortars pocked and smoothed by years of grinding grains or herbs. The tools were never wasted, never discarded lightly. If a handle splintered, it was carefully repaired, bound with strips of leather or sinew. Blades were sharpened with stones, edges tapped with small hammers to keep them keen. Every crack or chip was mended with patience. In this kitchen, learning was quiet and tactile. A daughter watched her mother's hands, the way she held a knife or turned a ladle, the subtle shifts of pressure and movement. Instructions were few. There was no need to speak. The skill passed through touch and repetition from one generation to the next. The weight of a knife in the hand, the resistance of a wooden spoon moving through thick stew. These were lessons learned slowly, deeply, as natural as breathing. Blacksmiths in the village forged new tools when old ones could no longer serve. But even then, the old tools were never truly gone. They became keepsakes, reminders of those who cooked before. Each tool carried more than function. It held memory and connection. The bones used in handles linked the kitchen to the animals that fed the household. The iron blades spoke of fire and craft, of heat and hammer. The kitchen was a place where nature and human skill met, shaped by fire and hand, while the great halls above echoed with feasts and celebration. Below, the kitchen tools moved quietly, tirelessly, shaping the daily life of a Viking household. Catch, cure, and cook. The smell of smoke hung heavy in the air, thick and steady, as thin wisps curled upward from the low fires where fish were hung on racks. The smoke was not just a scent, but a shield, preserving food for months when the seas froze and the land lay under snow. Fishing was not a pastime, but a necessity. Early mornings saw hands cast nets into cold waters or clutch spears by the shoreline. The catch was precious. A handful of fish could feed a family, maybe more. Every scale, every bone was a reminder of survival. Once caught, the work had only just begun. The fish were gutted carefully, every step done with purpose. The insides, the heads, even the smallest scraps. Nothing was wasted. These parts might become broth or bait. The kitchen always finding use. Salt was a treasure, gathered or traded, and it was sprinkled generously over the fish. Salt drew out moisture and stopped decay. The fish were then hung over smoky fires, suspended on wooden racks designed to catch the wisps of smoke that rose from smoldering wood. The smoke was slow and steady, a quiet watcher through the long hours. It penetrated the flesh, infusing it with flavor and locking in freshness. The fires burned low, never roaring, just enough to keep the process steady and gentle. Days were long, often spent beside streams or rugged shorelines, where nets were mended and bait prepared. The rhythm of the tides dictated the work. Ebb and flow, catch and cure. Winter was harsh and unyielding. Food saved by smoke and salt was a lifeline through months of cold and darkness. Preserving enough was a constant worry, a silent pressure beneath daily routines. Preparing fish was a skill passed down quietly, much like the tools. The cuts had to be precise, the salting even. Too little salt meant spoilage. Too much made the food hard and bitter. Around the fires, conversations were low, sometimes filled with stories of the sea, sometimes with silence. Focused on the task, children watched, learning how to gut, how to clean, how to hang. Cooking with preserved fish was simple, but vital. Thick stews simmered for hours, rich with smoky flavor. Bread or barley might be crumbled in, and sometimes fresh herbs from the garden added a rare note of green. Nothing was wasted here, not even the smoke. It was a kind of magic, turning fresh catch into sustenance that would last long after the nets were folded away. The connection between catching, curing, and cooking was a delicate cycle, each part relying on the other. The kitchen, the shore, the fires, they all worked together in quiet harmony. This was life at the edge of the world, resilient, patient, and shaped by the needs of the land and sea. Stews and survival. In the heart of the Viking kitchen, a large iron pot hung steadily over the fire. Its sides were blackened from years of use, a silent witness to countless meals made by hands that knew hardship and patience. Inside, a thick stew simmered slowly, bubbles rising and bursting with soft, gentle sounds that filled the smoky air. The stew was not a feast. It was not made to impress. It was survival. Every part of the animal found its way into the pot. Bones, cracked for marrow, tough cuts that needed hours to soften, and scraps left over from previous meals. Waste was a word unknown here. Nothing was discarded lightly. The stew was a quiet celebration of resourcefulness. Wild herbs, gathered carefully from the edge of the forest or the meadow, added subtle hints of flavor. Sweet-smelling wild garlic, sharp juniper berries, and earthy thyme wove through the broth like whispers from the land. They were seasoning enough in a world with no distant spices or markets. The kitchen was a place where the day's stories were shared. Around the pot, voices mingled with the crackle of firewood and the occasional hiss of steam. Tales of voyages, of hunts, of children's laughter, and village news passed between slow sips of broth. Stews cooked low and long, allowing tough meats to soften until they fell apart, mingling with roots and grains to create a thick, hearty meal. It was filling, warm, and steady, fuel for the long hours ahead. The simmering pot was a center of calm amid a busy household. While others prepared the longhouse, The stew patiently transformed simple ingredients into something sustaining, something that could fill hungry bellies through harsh weather and lean times. It was food born from necessity, but crafted with care. The slow bubble of stew was a reminder that even in struggle, there was comfort in routine. Children knew the smell well, the promise of a warm meal waiting at day's end. The elderly knew it as a balm for aching bones, a gentle heat spreading through cold fingers. No lavish spread here, just the honest, steady warmth of a pot that boiled low through day and night. The same pot that held yesterday's scraps could bring tomorrow's nourishment. Stews carried the taste of the earth and the sea, mingled with smoke and salt. They were history in a bowl, stories told with each spoonful. This was food for living, slow, deliberate, essential. Flavors without spices. Imagine sitting by the fire in a Viking longhouse. The flickering flames cast shadows on rough wooden walls, and the air carries the quiet crackle of burning wood. You lift a simple wooden bowl filled with stew or porridge, ready to taste the flavors of the north. But what do you find? No sugar to sweeten, no cinnamon or pepper to tingle your tongue. Instead, the tastes come from the earth itself, from sea salt, wild garlic, and nettles gathered fresh from nearby fields. Salt was precious. The Vikings knew its value, not just for flavor, but for preserving fish and meat through long winters. Coarse and mineral-rich, sea salt gave their food a sharpness that cut through the richness of smoked lamb or oily fish. Wild garlic offered a subtle punch, a hint of green, almost like a whisper of onion, but softer, more delicate. It grew freely in the forests and meadows, picked carefully by hands that knew exactly where to find it. Nettles, once boiled and softened, added a fresh bitterness, balancing heavier dishes with their earthy bite. The Vikings didn't have exotic spices like cinnamon or pepper. Their world was far from the spice trade routes. Instead, they coaxed flavor from what the land and sea provided. Their cooking was a study in simplicity and respect for natural ingredients. They learned how to bring out the best from humble things, slow cooking to deepen flavors, smoking to add a smoky edge, drying herbs to store and sprinkle when fresh ones weren't available. Meals were quiet affairs. There was no rush, no clatter of silverware. The sound of chewing was soft and deliberate, a silent conversation between person and plate. Savoring food was a humble act, a moment of peace in a hard life. The flavors might have been simple, but they were real, rooted in soil, salt, and smoke. Each bite was a connection to the earth, a reminder that even without spices, the food could sustain, nourish, and bring quiet comfort. The Viking palate knew restraint. It knew patience. It knew how to find richness in scarcity. No need for distant lands or expensive ingredients, just the sharp taste of salt, the green bite of wild plants, and the lingering warmth of a fire-cooked meal. The silence around the fire spoke volumes. Here, flavors weren't shouted. They were whispered, tasted slowly, and remembered quietly, baking without an oven. Imagine waking early in the cool morning air of a Viking settlement. There's no modern kitchen here, no warm oven waiting to bake loaves of bread. Instead, the Viking baker works with simple tools and the raw elements: fire, stone, grain, and water. Flatbreads were the everyday bread of the North, thick or thin, soft or crisp. They were cooked on hot stones set near the fire. The stones, heated by flames and embers, became the Viking oven, rough, uneven, and smoky. Grains were crushed by hand, using a small, rough stone called a quern. Barley and rye were common, sturdy grains that could grow in the cold soil. The grinding was slow and steady, turning hard kernels into coarse flour. Water was drawn from nearby streams, cold and fresh, mixed with the flour. It formed a simple dough. No yeast, no kneading machines, just the basics. The dough might be slightly sticky or stiff, depending on the season and the moisture in the air. Once shaped by hand into flat discs, the bread was laid carefully on the hot stone. The surface hissed as the dough met the heat. The bottom blackened slightly, covered in ash from the fire, an unexpected layer of flavor, smoky and earthy. Watching the bread cook required patience. It needed the right moment to flip, or it could burn. A soft pride came with each successful bake. The baker knew exactly how thick to make the bread, how long to leave it on the stone, so it was cooked through but still tender. No oven timer here, just intuition and experience passed down through generations. The smell of baking bread mixed with the scent of smoke and pine from the firewood. Bread was more than just food. It was a staple, a symbol of survival. It filled empty stomachs after long days of work and warmed cold hands on chilly mornings. Eating this bread meant tasting the land itself, the stone, the ash, the river water. Each bite carried a hint of smoke, a trace of the fire that baked it. The Viking kitchen was a place of creativity, born from necessity. Baking without an oven was a challenge, met with quiet skill and steady hands. The bread was simple, honest, and essential, a foundation for the meals that followed. In that smoky kitchen, with hot stones and handfuls of crushed grain, the Vikings made something timeless, something that carried the taste of their hard lives and the wild lands they called home. Feasting days. Feasting days were rare and special in a Viking's life. Most days were about survival, simple meals, and quiet routines. But when a feast was held, the longhouse transformed into a place of warmth, noise, and celebration. Imagine the air thick with the smell of roasting meat. A whole goat or pig might hang over the fire, turning slowly on a spit, its juices sizzling as they drip onto hot coals. The firelight flickers on faces flushed with excitement, the sound of laughter and louder voices filling the hall. Beer mugs, carved from wood or hollowed horn, clink in toasts. The bitter, smoky brew was strong and dark, shared among friends and family as the stories began. Food was served on carved wooden trays, not delicate plates. These heavy rustic boards bore the bounty of the hunt and harvest. Roasted meats, fresh bread, smoked fish, root vegetables, and piles of salted cheese. The guests sat close together, elbows brushing as they passed food from hand to hand. The longhouse echoed with singing, the sound of ancient songs rising and falling like waves. Some songs told of gods and heroes, others of battles won and lost, and some were simply joyful shouts to the night. But behind the scenes, the cooks worked quietly in the shadows. Their hands moved quickly, unseen and often unthanked. While the feast was about joy and community, it was also about endurance and tireless labor. The cooks prepared enormous pots of stew to feed the crowd, their faces glowing from the heat of the fire. They sliced meat, poured more ale, and refilled wooden trays before anyone could ask. The kitchen was smoky and hot, full of hard work. There was little time to rest, even on these rare days of celebration. Yet despite the exhaustion, the cooks carried pride in their work. Their hands created the food that brought everyone together, food that fed more than just bodies, but also spirits. Feasting was about more than just eating. It was a vital thread in the Viking community. It strengthened bonds and honored traditions. The louder voices, the singing, and the firelight all painted a picture of a people who celebrated life fiercely, even when survival was never guaranteed. And though the cooks remained mostly unseen, their role was at the heart of every feast. Without their skill and care, these days of joy would not have been possible. The last tasks at night. As night deepens over the Viking longhouse, the bustle of the day slowly fades into quiet, but the kitchen is far from done. The cooks and helpers move with practiced efficiency, knowing that the last tasks must be done before rest can come. Large iron pots, once bubbling with stews and broths, are scraped clean with wooden scrapers. Every bit of food is precious, nothing wasted. The thick residues are loosened and rinsed away in cold water, drawn from a nearby stream or well, the chill biting at their hands. The tools of the day, knives, ladles, wooden bowls, are washed carefully and set to dry. The water cool and crisp, a stark contrast to the warmth of the fire that now flickers low. Nearby, bundles of herbs gathered earlier hang from wooden beams, suspended to dry in the gentle night air. These wild herbs will flavor future meals, preserved for the colder months when fresh plants are scarce. Their scent mingles faintly with the smoke and earth, a quiet promise of life in the seasons to come. Barrels and storage containers are sealed tight, wax or pitch smeared carefully along cracks to keep the precious food inside safe from pests and spoilage. Salted fish, smoked meats, and root vegetables are stashed away in cool, dark places, ready to sustain the household through long winter days. The hearth fire, which has been the heart of the longhouse all day, is tended for the last time. The cooks scoop ashes over the glowing embers, carefully tucking them beneath a layer of cold ash. This keeps the fire's warmth smoldering, ready to be rekindled with ease come morning. In this moment, the longhouse holds a fragile stillness. The flickering shadows cast by the dying embers dance gently on the wooden walls, and the smell of smoke lingers softly in the air. Outside, the wind may howl, or the snow may fall, but inside the walls, a quiet calm settles. This is the pause between the hard labor of the day and the much-needed rest that will restore energy for tomorrow. For the cooks, this stillness is brief. Soon, their bodies will seek warmth and sleep, dreams perhaps filled with the simple hope of a safe day ahead. But before that, there is a shared silent acknowledgement of the day's work, the care given to every meal, every flame, every detail. This final ritual, done night after night, is a testament to endurance and quiet resilience. The longhouse grows still, the last embers rest, and the Viking kitchen sleeps until dawn calls the cooks back to the hearth once more. The women behind the meals. Behind every meal in a Viking longhouse, there were women whose hands shaped the very survival of their families and communities. Mothers, daughters, widows. These were the quiet keepers of the hearth, the heart of the home. Their work was more than just preparing food. It was power. It was knowledge passed down through generations, often without words, but through careful touch and close watching. The secrets of how to stretch scarce ingredients, how to cure fish and smoke meat, how to coax flavor from the earth. This wisdom kept people alive through bitter winters and lean times. Cooking was survival in its most immediate form. The women knew how to gather wild herbs, how to grind grain for bread, how to keep the fire burning just right. Their days were long and filled with endless tasks, but their role was essential. Without their skills, the longhouse would not thrive. Yet, in the grand tales of Vikings, the sagas carved into stone and spoken around campfires, the names of these women often remain unspoken. Their voices are soft, their faces faded from history's spotlight. The warriors and explorers are remembered, but the women who fed them, who nurtured every morning and night, rarely find a place in legend. Still, their influence was immense. They shaped daily life in ways both visible and hidden. A well-cooked meal could mean strength for battle, or the comfort needed to face harsh realities. A warm hearth, tended by patient hands, was a refuge from the cold world outside. In the smoky kitchen, these women worked not for fame, but out of necessity, love, and resilience. Their labor was steady and unglamorous, yet filled with quiet dignity. From the youngest daughter learning to carry water and grind grain, to the experienced widow who managed the longhouse's stores and fires, each held a piece of the community's lifeblood. They moved with purpose, speaking little, but communicating much. A glance, a nod, a practiced movement told stories of family, survival, and hope. Their strength was in their constancy, the daily rituals that formed the backbone of Viking life. Though history may overlook them, the women behind the meals were the invisible force keeping the wheels of life turning. Day by day, in the flickering firelight, their hands worked tirelessly, preparing, preserving, and nurturing. They were the steady heartbeats beneath the roar of the Viking world. What history tastes like. The Viking longhouse no longer stands. Its wooden beams have long since rotted away, and the smoke-darkened walls have vanished with time. But if you close your eyes and listen closely, you might still catch a faint trace. The lingering smell of smoke curling through the air. The earthy taste of thick, savory broth simmering over an open fire. History often shows us weapons, sharp swords, sturdy shields, and tells stories of battles and conquests. These are the vivid images that capture our imagination. Yet, beneath every saga of war and exploration, there was the quiet rhythm of daily life, centered on food. In every Viking home, Food was far more than just sustenance. It was life itself. The simple act of preparing a meal, gathering herbs, smoking fish, baking flatbread, was an unspoken ritual that connected families, communities, and generations. Those moments around the fire, the stirring of stews and the crackling of flames, carried with them warmth, survival, and hope. The people who made this food, often forgotten by history, were the ones who truly kept the world turning. They worked without rest, their hands skilled in ancient knowledge, passed down through the ages. These cooks were not just providers, they were guardians of life, preserving tradition and ensuring that the longhouse stood strong. Museums may display the weapons and armor of Vikings, but the essence of their daily existence was found in the kitchen's glow, the steady, enduring heartbeat of a people. Though we may never taste the exact flavors of their meals, we can imagine the textures, the smells, and the sounds. We can feel the smoke in our lungs and the warmth of the fire on our skin. What history tastes like is the echo of all those quiet hands that stirred pots, tended fires, and prepared food in the shadows. It's a story not told in loud battles, but in gentle, patient care. And in that lingering taste, we find a connection to the past, a reminder that behind every great saga, there were ordinary lives lived with strength, resilience, and quiet grace. Now, as the day comes to a close, imagine the warmth of the longhouse fire slowly fading into the night. The smoke rises softly, carrying with it the stories of survival, of quiet kitchens and unseen hands. Think of the women and men who labored by those fires, keepers of life in a world so different from our own. Their work was steady, patient, and full of care. You are safe now, resting far from the smoky hearths and simple meals of the past. The long day is done, so close your eyes, take a deep breath in, and let it out slowly. Let the flicker of the fire grow dim in your mind, the warm amber light softening into darkness behind your eyelids. Picture it now, the last glow of the hearth fading as embers settle, quiet and content. The gentle crackle of firewood has slowed to a hush. The day is done. The world, for a moment, is still. Let yourself sink deeper into comfort, into stillness. You are safe here. The air is cool and clean, like the breeze from a fjord at dusk. The smells of the Viking kitchen, smoke, roasted barley, herbs hanging from wooden beams, all begin to fade into the background, dissolving like mist over a quiet field. You can still hear the faint clinking of pottery, maybe the low hum of a lullaby being sung in Old Norse. But even those sounds are drifting away now, like the tide receding from the shore. You've traveled back in time tonight, not in the dramatic way of sagas and swords, but gently, through the back door of a longhouse, past a cook fire, and into the softest corners of daily life in a time long gone. It's the kind of journey where nothing is asked of you, no quests, no battles, just the slow passage of another quiet evening among people who lived and loved, worked and rested long before we were here. Thank you truly for joining us on this slow and quiet walk through history. This space was made for nights like this, for soft landings, gentle endings, and the reassurance that the past can hold peace, not just noise. If you felt any comfort in this story, even just for a few minutes, if it helped you breathe a little deeper or loosen the knots of the day, I'd be honored if you liked this video. A simple click, and yet it sends a small signal out into the dark. This helped. This mattered. Let's have more of this. And if you'd like to come along on more journeys like this, not thrilling, but thoughtful, not loud, but kind, then please subscribe to Boring History for Sleep. It's a gentle place, built with intention. We visit forgotten people, unsung stories, and moments too small for the history books, but perfect for bedtime. We believe the past can be a lullaby if you listen in the right way. Think of this channel as your quiet little time machine, always ready to hum to life when you need rest. Whether we're talking about monks harvesting honey, Victorian letter writing habits, the shipping routes of medieval spice traders, or how someone once mended nets by lantern light on a rainy night in Iceland, each episode is crafted not just to inform, but to comfort, a soft blanket of facts wrapped in slow, soothing storytelling. So next time sleep feels distant or your mind won't quite settle, come back here. Let the old stories carry you slowly and without urgency. There's no plot to follow, no characters to keep track of, no pressure to stay awake. Let your thoughts wander. Let your breathing slow. Let history become background music for your dreams. And remember, you're not alone. Thousands of other listeners, just like you, are also lying back right now, eyes closed, floating between consciousness and sleep, joined by the quiet murmur of a tale from long ago. In a way, it's its own kind of modern village, a quiet gathering by the fire. Only now, the fire is in your headphones or your screen, and the village is scattered across the world. But the feeling is the same: safety, calm, and the shared ritual of rest. You've made it through the day, whatever it held, the good, the hard, the boring, the overwhelming. It's behind you now. Here, in this moment, there is nothing left to do, no one to impress, nothing to fix, just a soft voice, a quiet room, and the comforting rhythm of a tale long since told and nearly forgotten. So let your body sink into the mattress. Let your shoulders fall. Let your thoughts drift as light as feathers across the sea of your mind. If you're still listening, you may notice how the pauses stretch longer, the sentences slower, the sounds quieter. That's intentional. It's your cue to drift, to float, to finally let go. And if you're already asleep, well, even better. That means we've done our job. For those of you still gently awake, I'll say it again. Thank you for joining us, for trusting us with your attention, your stillness, your transition into rest. It means more than you know. In a world where everything demands speed and energy and performance, choosing to slow down is an act of quiet rebellion and a gift to yourself. We'll be right here whenever you need us, ready with another story that doesn't shout, ready to carry you back in time, one calm step at a time. Until then, sleep well. May your dreams be soft, your blankets warm, and your worries small. Good night, truly.